Each Corpus Sister has her own companion hound, and once you kill their owner, you get to keep the pet for yourself. The hounds are modular companions comprised of 4 parts. In addition to the hound itself, you get a blueprint for a random part that can be traded. Aside from getting the hounds from sisters, they can also be assembled by legs at Fortuna from the parts that you craft. Like other modular items, they can be gilded or exchanged for Solaris United standing, once you level them to level 30. You can now install potatoes into ungilded items, but gilding them gives you a polarity and allows you to customize them. Once gilded, each hound model and their weapons grant mastery points like other companions. The hounds are comprised of 4 parts: the model, core, bracket and stabilizer. The model, bracket and stabilizer determine which precepts the companion will have by default, and the model determines the weapon. The hound can use any precept and weapon as long as you have it, so you only need to forma and build one companion. Unless you want to have multiple. The model determines the shape of the hound's head, the weapon and the audit precept that the companion will have by default. The Byra model comes with the Lacerton weapon and Null audit precept. The Dorma model comes with the Batotan weapon and Repo audit precept. The Heck model will have the Akatan weapon and Equilibrium audit precept. The core of the hound determines its body shape and base health, shields and armor. If you're going to be using the Link health, shields and armor mods, these stats are irrelevant. The Adlet core has 50 extra shields, the Garmur core has 50 extra armor and the Raiju core has 50 extra health. The hound's bracket determines the shape of its legs and modulates health, armor and shield values, and the default denial precept. These modifiers are doubled on gilded companions. The Sella bracket increases health by 10%, shields by 15% and decreases armor by 5%. It has the mod reflex denial by default. The Urga bracket increases health by 15%, armor by 10% and decreases shields by 5%. It also had the precept diversified denial. The Zub bracket decreases health by 5%, increases shields by 10% and armor by 15%. It also has the precept evasive denial. The stabilizer determines the shape of the tail, the default polarity and the prospectus precept. The Frac stabilizer comes with a Vizarin or D polarity, which is useful for survivability mods. It also has the focused prospectus precept. The Hinta stabilizer comes with a Matter I or V polarity. It also has the synergized prospectus precept. The Wand stabilizer has a Naramon or Dash polarity, and the aerial prospectus precept. The hound's precepts are the companion's abilities, determined by the audit, denial and prospectus mods. The companion can only have one of each kind, but can use any regardless of their parts. The audit precepts are utility precepts. The Equilibrium audit unleashes 3 shock waves that knock down enemies within 15 meters and deal 300 damage. This is relatively useful as crowd control, but by the time that the hound is done stomping, the enemies get back to their feet. I feel like it would be more effective if it was just 1 shock wave, since then the hound could attack the enemies before they get up. The damage isn't really significant past level 30. The damage that the precepts deal is, in general, insignificant when compared to the damage of the hound's own weapon. Even with just primed pressure point and primed fever strike, the weapon can deal over 1000 damage. The Repo audit precept emits a magnetic pulse that disarms enemies within 30 meters. It is pretty effective here in the simulacrum, but I don't think I have seen it work this effectively in missions. The hound usually uses it at the wrong time and only gets a few enemies disarmed. The Null audit steals the aura from an Eximus unit and applies it to the hound itself for 60 seconds. This is somewhat useful depending on the Eximus aura, but I have noticed that the bubble from the Arctic Eximus will get in the way of your ranged weapons. The denial precepts are mainly defensive precepts. The reflex denial generates a shield that reflects 90% damage taken in pulses over 10 seconds as magnetic damage in a 12-meter radius. The damage absorbed can also be from friendly fire. The damage scales with the levels of the enemies, but since it's magnetic damage, it's mostly effective against the Corpus. The bubble also frequently gets in the way of my weapons. I haven't been able to confirm this, but I feel like the ability may be able to deal damage to you and the hound. It might be better not to use this precept until some of the Hound's bugs get resolved. Diversified Denial creates 3 specters that fight for 30 seconds and each deals 85% of the Hound's damage. I'm honestly not sure if the specters deal as much damage as they should. The specters also won't use other precepts. Otherwise, this might be the most effective precept for keeping your Hound alive, since the Hound returns if the specters get killed. And you get 3 puppies instead of 1. Evasive Denial teleports the Hound a safe distance away and employs a displacement field that grants it 75% chance to dodge enemy fire for 8 seconds. The effectiveness of this precept depends on the mission. It won't help much against enemies that have melee or area of effect attacks, and against a big number of enemies. The Prospectus precepts are offensive precepts. The Focused Prospectus fires a focused energy beam that deals 900 heat damage over 4.5 seconds. The Hound will stay in place and fire at a single enemy that gets pushed back by the beam. If the enemy dies before the beam runs out, it will switch to another target if there is one in range. As I mentioned before, the damage of this precept is lower than the Hound's melee attacks. Synergized Prospectus fires an electric spark that deals 300 damage and ricochets up to 7 times, seeking out the nearest enemy in 30 meters. This would be a great ability for crowd control, but it deals self-damage both to the Hound and your frame. This might get fixed, but I'd recommend not using this mod until it is. Unless you need self-damage for your setup. Aerial Prospectus launches a beacon that marks a spot where an orbital strike will hit with 1200 blast damage in a 7-meter radius. The beacon is aimed at an enemy, but it stays on the ground, so it's more likely that no enemies will get hit. And it's blast damage, so it doesn't matter at higher levels. Now that we covered the precepts, let's see how to build your companion. The Hounds can use mods for Sentinels and the Link Health, Armor and Shield mods. Since you can put any precept on any Hound once you have them, you only need to form a 1 Hound. Unless you want to have multiple, but there isn't much reason to do that. The Hounds come with 4 Panjaga polarities for precepts, which is enough for 3 precepts and vacuum. So you might only need 1 forma, or less if you don't want to use a second link mod. Obligatory mods are Vacuum and Animal Instinct. I recommend at least Link Health and Pack Leader for survivability. Medi Pet Kit is also useful to that you don't need to worry about the revive timer. For utility, Medi Ray, Guardian and the Synth set are good if you want to use them. I recommend not using all 3 precepts since the Hound will just cycle through its abilities and not attack with its melee weapon. I have been using the Repo Audit and Evasive Denial and it's proven somewhat effective at keeping my Hound alive while I've been hunting sisters. I don't think that there is a good option for the Prospectus precept until Synergized Prospectus gets fixed. The Hound's weapons are their strong point and the main reason why you would want to use one of them. Like the Kicker Moa, the weapon's damage will apply to the melee attack of the Hound. There are 3 different weapons. The Akaton, which deals slash and puncture damage, the Batoton, which deals impact and puncture, and the Lacerton, which deals impact and slash damage. Otherwise, the weapons have the same stats. I'd recommend either the Akaton or Lacerton for their slash damage. The weapons have low critical and status chance, but a high critical multiplier. And for some reason they have a magazine of 6. They also have no range or speed stat and, as far as I can tell, it makes no difference whether you have them equipped or not. I suppose they forgot to remove them when they were removing the Gladiator mod set and other mods with set bonuses. I'd say it's best to build for slash and viral, and you can add True Steel and Organ Shatter for the occasional critical hit. Or you could build for more elements and status chance with Condition Overload. Keep in mind that, since Condition Overload has been nerfed, it's not better than Primed Pressure Point until the enemy has 3 status procs on them. This build will work with a frame or a weapon that can reliably apply status effects on enemies. Aside from the ones already mentioned, I got a couple more issues with the Hounds. probably my biggest one is that it's too easy to get more of them than you will ever need, since each sister gives you a fully built Hound and one random part blueprint. You need only one of each model so that you can get mastery points for the companion and the weapon, and one copy of each Precept or the ones that you're planning to use, and those can be traded. Sure, you can level the extra companions and trade them to legs for Solaris United standing, but they are a pain to level. I don't usually advocate for increasing the grind in Warframe, but I think it would make more sense if you only had a chance to get a fully built Hound from a sister. Otherwise you'd get a component blueprint. I don't see much point in building a Hound, unless you want to make it look a certain way. The Hounds are good at combat since they can deal a lot of damage, but I haven't found them otherwise helpful in higher level content. At some point, the companions don't deal significant damage to enemies, and I usually choose one that can stay alive and has some utility. And I've had some trouble keeping them alive in higher levels. If I'm not using a support frame that can heal them, or if I'm not using my melee weapon, they keep dying. And having a companion that you need to revive every few minutes is a bigger handicap than having a sentinel that just dies. I find Precept and Vulpaphilas more useful, and you can get those easily. Looking at my list of complaints, you might think that I don't like the Hounds, but I actually do. As long as they're not using their precepts, they can deal a lot of damage. I have seen them one-shot Grenier even at level 80. I hope that the precepts will get looked at least to remove the self-damage bug. If we ever get that companions rework that was mentioned a while ago, maybe they will become more useful. The companions have kinda bad AI in general, from using their abilities at the wrong time, to charging into a group of enemies and getting themselves killed. So I think that being able to give them commands would make them more useful.